All right, hi everyone. Welcome to this off-season edition of Bleav in Bills, presented by FanDuel. I am Adam Benigni of WGRZ TV and Sports Talk Live Buffalo. Sal Maiorana, the Rochester Democrat and Chronicle, either just fresh off of or in the midst of vacation, one of the two.
And still in the middle of it.
This is when those who cover the NFL, shift down. Understandably so, and our man in the middle of the day is a familiar face here on the show, Bucky Brooks, host of the Bucky Brooks Show on the Bleav Network, and NFL.com analyst, former Buffalo Bill. If I remember correctly, 94, is that right, Buck?
94, 48th overall pick, second round.
Yeah, I was there.
Good to have you, man. Nice to see you again. How you doing?
Man, I'm good. Look, it's wrapping up. You talk about vacation. Sal is like taking plenty of time before we get to it, because we know once we get to the end of July, it is a full-on sprint, and hopefully for good teams into the middle of February. So we're hoping that we have that kind of run where we can talk about all the way into the middle of February.
Yep. Yeah, it's a grind, man. You're right. I've been doing it for a long time, and this is my favorite month. Actually, from middle of June to middle of July is my favorite month period, because the NFL is gone from my life, and I love life at that point.
And you know what? I can remember back in the day, and this is when they're at St. John Fisher, right? And we would show up, and Sal remembers this well, move-in day. This is like pre-Sean McDermott, right? And they would have us lined up in like 90-degree heat, right, with like a small cooler of Gatorade outside one of the dorms there in St. John Fisher, and you'd be like watching guys lug in couches and televisions and everything. It was a miserable day for the players, miserable day for the media. And Sal, man, I remember you just kind of just sitting there with that disgruntled look on your face, which is
Bucky,
so much a part of your brand.
I called that for whatever it was, 20-some years. The stupidest day of my year was that. Nothing in the year, 365 days, there was nothing dumber than that day watching guys move luggage and TVs and Game Boys or whatever they were into their door. That was news. We actually considered that news in this business because it's the NFL. So thankfully the Bills did away with it. They don't allow us there when they're moving in. And that was the best thing that the McDermott group did for us, was to eliminate that stupid day.
Among the first things they did, that was gone.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, look, it's interesting because now they don't even really go away to camp like that anymore. Most teams are doing it in-house in their facility. They're getting away from that part of it. And I remember so much of that as the experience. I think as you talk about the stupidest day moving in, I do remember like spooning or threading a shoestring through the keyhole to be able to have your own lanyard to be able to go to your dorms. And I remember the big deal was pushing your two twin beds together to try and create a double bed as opposed to sleeping on the little thing in the dorms. But in spite of all of that, I do still think that there's a necessary evil to that part of training camp, because even though pro sports are not quite what we romanticize in youth and high school in terms of the team coming together, that 6-week experience does give you some of that bonding and fellowship and camaraderie that is needed to be a great team if you can get everything together when it comes to connectivity and the chemistry.
Yeah, I mean, the Bills aren't there for they're not there for long this year, Sal, right? But I mean, it seems like Joe Brady still values that, right?
It's too bad, Buck, because back when you played, like you were at Fredonia for at least a month, probably 5 weeks of the summer, you guys were there. The Bills used to be at Fisher for about 4 weeks, and it has gradually gone down and down and down. This week, they're actually at Fisher for 8 practices. It's crazy. And then they're going back to Buffalo. So you're right. That training camp experience, Josh Allen talks about it all the time. He loves it. He loves being in the dorms with his boys for a couple or 3 weeks at a time. But they're not getting that experience this year. They've got literally 8 days. They're here and gone. And then it's right back to the normal routine. And to me, I don't really understand it. And I understand, a lot of teams have done this. There's probably like 7 or 8 teams that even go anywhere these days. I don't know why more teams don't do it, Buck, for the exact reason you said. That's when you build your camaraderie, is you're in dorms. That's all it is you and your guys for 3, 4, 5 weeks at a time.
Yeah, I think it came down to the bottom line. I think it came down to the expenditures. I think owners looking at how much they're spending on their facilities and all the other stuff. Why would they send them away when they spend so much stuff? And so what people try to do is recreate it to a lesser degree. There's probably a local hotel that they'll put everyone up in when they go back to Buffalo. They'll have them stay at the facilities late. They'll probably create 2 or 3 team activities, whether it's bowling, whether it's like paintball or whatever. Some of that they did in the summer, but they'll try and create some of those bonding experiences. But I'll say it still pales in comparison to being in the dorm where you really are shut out from the outside world and you're forced to interact and engage with one another, whether that's playing dominoes or cards or video games or whatever. There's some time that you spend that helps you become more connected with the other guys that are on the roster. And people still don't believe it. No matter what the money is, no matter what the fanfare is around the game, there still has to be some of that childhood-like camaraderie that's developed to allow this team to be the connected team that you need to be really come over to overcome some of the adversity that every team faces in the midst of their run.
Well, it's something that the Bills have obviously preserved through the McDermott era and now into the Joe Brady era, albeit, as Sal mentioned, on a diminishing basis with just limited exposure for them there this year, and something they seem committed to moving forward. But you're right, it does go against the trend of the National Football League, where so many of these teams now have put so much money into these training facilities, not just their stadiums, but their headquarters and training facilities. And why wouldn't you want your players there at the most formative time with the absolute best access to all of those resources and all of that equipment? It's an interesting discussion, one that'll continue into training camp and the preseason here. In the meantime, FanDuel, presenting sponsor for this show and others on the Bleav network of podcasts, looking at the Super Bowl odds. Los Angeles Rams, your favorite at plus 500. And there are the Buffalo Bills and Ravens at – actually, the Bills are second at plus 1,000. Ravens plus 1,100. Then the Seattle Seahawks at plus 1,200. And, Bucky, as we sort of have this discussion, I would start off using that as a platform and ask you, given a change at head coach, change at defensive coordinator, and sort of a lot of transitional questions to, sort of a new administration, new power structure with Brandon Beane as president and general manager now in the post-Sean McDermott era. Do you think the Bills are worthy of being favored, to being that high in the conversation, or do you expect maybe a bit of a transition this year? Where do you fall as you begin to look at this team and assess the roster and the changes there?
Man, it's so hard really to get a gauge on the team, right? Because you have so much respect for Sean McDermott. And I'm going to say this, I was really surprised, obviously, with him being let go, given the fact that I watched the work that he put on when they knocked off the Jacksonville Jaguars in that wildcard run, and then continue to put themselves in a position to where they probably should have run the next game against the Denver Broncos, but didn't get it done. Now what I'm looking at is a team that, is going to be notably better on offense, right? DJ Moore coming over gives them the receiver that they lack. You think about Joe Brady being able to fully unleash that offense. But I think the uncertainty just comes with how is this defense going to look under Jim Leonhard? He is a Rex Ryan, Baltimore Ravens disciple. They're going to be very creative in terms of how they come after the quarterback and how they stifle the running game. And so it's going to be a lot of pressures and simulated pressures and those things that are going to be different. I just wonder if they're going to have the personnel to pull that off in year one to match what should be a Super Bowl capable offense on the other side. So how does that world come together in transition? And here's the thing, where most coaches would get a little bit of a honeymoon period or some grace to kind of learn their team and roster. If the Bills take a step back, it's going to be viewed as a failure. And so Joe Brady steps into a situation where he has to top the predecessor. And I think the predecessor had 8 playoff appearances in 9 years. I mean, those are big shoes to fill as a first-time head coach.
Yeah, we've said this on the show. He is under as much pressure as any coach in the league, even though it's his first year as the head coach. Most guys like this, Bucky, they move into this situation as a first-time head coach. They have a lousy team, and there's no pressure to win right away. This guy has to step right in and win, and not only win, but he needs to take this team to a championship game. At least the AFC championship game, and hopefully beyond. I think he's got a huge, huge task in front of him. It was weird. We were talking about on the radio just an hour ago. I don't know if it was ESPN or something. They ranked the top rosters 1 to 32 in the NFL. You give me your opinion on this. They had the Bills top to bottom 1 to 53 as the 4th best roster in the league behind, I think it was the Seahawks. I'm not sure what the order was, but it was Seahawks, Eagles, and Rams were the top 3. I forget which order. They had the Bills at 4. Now, I heard that. I didn't read it. And I just wait a minute. The Bills really have the fourth best roster, because we've said this numerous times. They have Josh Allen. They have a star running back. And then what else do they really have as far as elite players? Give me your opinion on this. Do they really have the fourth best roster in the NFL?
I don't think so. But here's what I was saying. This comes from someone who really helped turn the Buffalo Bills into the perennial contender in the 90s, Bill Polian. When I went to Carolina, Bill Polian had certainly impacted the front office there, and we talked about it, where at that point he had said that it would take 8 to 12 blue chip players to be able to compete at the championship level. And that resonated with that organization. So when I stepped in there, even though he was gone, we talked about that. And I think about how those Buffalo Bills teams were constructed in the 90s. When you think about Thurman Thompson, Andre Reed, and Jim Kelly, and Bruce Smith, 4 Hall of Famers that we're talking about. We think about Henry Jones and how many blue chip players, Darryl Talley, Cornelius Bennett. I mean, just think about the guys that we talk about. Like, that still should be the bar that we measure this version of the Bills. When I look at this team now, we'll talk about, okay, Josh Allen and James Cook. We can talk about Deion Dawkins. Now you add in DJ Moore, who would be a top 15 wide receiver. But on defense, I don't know who would be that guy that kind of carries that. I mean, I know there'd be a lot of excitement about Ed Oliver and what he can do in this new defense, but I don't think people around the league would carry him as a top 10, top 15, top 20 guy, maybe. So when we talk about that, I think what is lost is I always felt like this was the team that played the best team ball of any team over the last 8-9 years. That they found a way, whatever their flaws were, they kind of came together like Voltron and figured it out, and they were able to overcome it. And Josh Allen is a big eraser, but Josh Allen can't do this by himself. So unless there's some tremendous growth by some of their young players or underrated players, it's going to be hard to say that they're the fourth best roster, but that still doesn't mean they can't make a run. It just means that the margin for error is different, where execution has to be at such a high level to make up for maybe the talent deficiencies when they face some of those heavyweights that we'll talk about in the league.
All right. So that's a great point, Bucky. And let's kind of expand on that a little bit. I mean, I think by promoting Joe Brady at the time, Sal and I were both like, wait a minute, you had an opportunity to go outside and bring someone else in, but maybe, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? You've got a guy like Josh Allen who begins and ends any conversation surrounding the Buffalo. I mean, how many blue chip players does just his presence make up for, relatively speaking? I mean, he accounts for a lot, right? So you have someone who he's comfortable with, his former offensive coordinator becomes the head coach, appears ready to kind of handle the CEO responsibility, some question marks surrounding all of that. But I feel like, especially with the addition of DJ Moore, we have a really good sense of what this offense is going to be. You had raised the question mark about the defense earlier, and you're right. Ed Oliver, I mean, if he's unleashed and sort of unlocked in this thing, great. More freedom. We've heard him talk about that. But the change of scheme, I mean, I think there are a lot of question marks. And Sal and I have used, I think the Greg Rousseau situation is fascinating, right? There's a guy, he's out of the traditional defensive end role, what he was drafted for and in, and you go to the 3-4, and now all of a sudden he's standing up, right? I mean, he's an example of the X factor, and you can multiply that by other players on that team, what's going on to the second cornerback position, all of that. Defensively, how's a guy like Rousseau going to transition to that new role where he's essentially an outside linebacker now? I mean, I do feel like it's going to take some time to transition into this new defense under Jim Leonhard.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me way back because we keep talking about yesteryear when Walker was there and Cornelius Bennett was listed as a outside linebacker, but he was rushing the passer, like Gerald Talley was dropping or whatever. I think the same is going to be true for Greg Rousseau. I think he's going to spend probably 80, 85, should be 90% of his time rushing the passer, but he'll be listed in the media guide as an outside linebacker. I think the bigger thing will be how do they adapt going from that 4-man line to what is like an odd front, and how they're going to bring the pressure and who is going to be the complement to Greg Rousseau. So if we say that, hey, he's going to be the designated pass rusher on the outside, Ed Oliver is going to give them a little inside presence, who's the other person that's going to emerge as a potential, I would say, double-digit guy? But that's not really what people are doing. Now they're getting it in waves. Do you look at the roster and say, hey, we have 5 guys that can get us 6 or more sacks, to get us to 8, to get us to 40, where we're near the top of the league and sack production. Can we cobble that? Is Jim Leonhard such a mastermind that he can put that together with his schematics to make those guys play above expectation when it comes to maybe some of the natural talent that you look at when you watch them on tape?
Bucky, I know you didn't play defense in the NFL, but give us, I mean, you know the game. The three guys in the middle of the defensive line, so it's going to be not the outside, the edge rushers, obviously. What is really the biggest difference between what those three guys are going to be doing as opposed to what they would have been doing in a four-man front? So Oliver, Deion Walker, TJ Sanders we figure those are going to be their starting three most likely in those roles. I mean, to me, it looks like they're shifting over a couple feet. I don't know what the big difference is. What is the real difference between the three-man alignment and the four-man alignment?
Well, really, it's not much of anything, right? So if this was an old school 3-4 defense like the Bill Belichick, Bill Parcells defense, where you're two gapping, or even going all the way back to like Ted Cottrell. When Ted Cottrell was at Buffalo and he was the defensive coordinator, they had Big Ted Washington up front. They had two gappers and they would be responsible for the hole to the right and to the left. And that allowed the linebackers to run and scrape. That would be one thing, but they're not playing that traditional type of 3-4 defense. They're going to be aggressive where they're aggressive into their gap. There's a lot of movement. There's going to be a lot of pre-snap walking around and trying to disguise their intentions before they really attack the quarterback. So really nothing really changes from that. And to be honest, the league is one where you're playing 70 to 75% of it in nickel personnel. So there can be 5 DBs on the field. There may be 2 linemen, maybe 3 linemen on the field, however they cobble those things. So a lot of it is the semantics of it all. They're going to be multiple. The main thing will be, can they do what the Buffalo Bills did for so long under McDermott? Not give up big plays, make teams drive the length of the field, play the odds, and then take advantage of those things that were given to set the offense up for success? Or are they going to have a radical change where they're crazy aggressive, but in being aggressive to create plays, they give up more plays? That's where you're going to have to find that line. And as you talk about Joe Brady kind of playing that CEO role, when he was the offensive coordinator, it was easy to focus on the offense, points. Well, now as the chess master, he has to be able to tell the offense and the defense and the special teams, here's how we need to play this game. A little more conservative on defense, aggressive on offense, special teams, we may have to steal some points. How does he manage the entire operation to put the team in the best position? That's the biggest challenge that he faces, is different managing one unit as opposed to managing 3 units and putting it all together to put the team in the best position to win.
So that leads to an obvious next question, Bucky, because we haven't had the opportunity to talk to you since the relatively surprising firing of Sean McDermott after that playoff loss to the Denver Broncos, and the team falling short of reaching a Super Bowl with Josh Allen at quarterback, and now well into his tenure. A lot of questions about the receiving core, which they addressed with the trade for DJ Moore. But getting back to Brady himself, what did you think of that hire? How qualified is he? What was your reaction at the time, and maybe how do you view it now as training camp approaches?
Well, obviously really surprised, right? Because without knowing Sean McDermott, I had a tremendous amount of respect for what they were able to do. And this goes back to when Leslie Frazier were there or whatever. Like when you watched them, I just felt like they were a very fundamentally sound team. I felt like they kind of mastered the art of not beating themselves, which is why they were able to go 8 and 9 years, which is unheard of when you really think about it. And I do know that Buffalo Bills fans and we in general kind of judge everything off rings and championships and those things. But I'll tell you, man, you have to get into the tournament consistently to win the tournament, and they were able to do it. Now, if Joe Brady's able to take the best of what the program was under Sean McDermott, meaning, hey, I really like this worked for the team, I don't need to make wholesale changes, but maybe I have a different idea on how we can get it to the next level, that would be the perfect scenario where, hey, we like the structure, but let's just kind of freshen it up a little bit so it has just a different feel to it as we get into the postseason or whatever. That will work. But I just think that everyone is going to have to be patient with him, because he's going to be drinking out of a fire hose as a first-time head coach and trying to figure it out. And then the big thing will be, has he prepared himself? What happens the first time we lose 2 or 3 games in a row? Do I stick with what I believe in and what we've talked about all offseason, or do I have to pivot and make some changes? Great head coaches are able to give the team what it needs at that time. And some of that comes from experience as you develop that expertise in being a leader. how quickly can he develop that experience to keep the ship kind of going in the right direction? That'd be the key for this team, because look, everyone is going to judge this team on their ability to get to the Super Bowl. And that's really hard to be so results oriented when so many people are talking about the process of building a team up.
All right, so we've got to ask you, because you're a former wide receiver, if we can assume that DJ Moore and Khalil Shakir are the top two guys that they've got on the team at that position. Bucky, we're sitting here with Josh Palmer, who they signed to a relatively decent free agent deal last year, and the enigma that is Keon Coleman. So what do you see there with those two guys? Because it just feels like those are the two guys that are fighting for playing time. Shakir's going to be on the field, and so is DJ Moore. The guys that are going to be fighting for that number 3 spot are Coleman and Palmer. What do you need to see from one of those two guys, and who do you think ultimately would be the guy that's going to win that job?
I would like to think that Keon Coleman is going to be the guy that ultimately wins it. If Joe Brady is the believer in him that he's proclaimed to be, I think he's going to get every opportunity to be a big factor in that. I do believe your wide receiver core must be built like a basketball team, where you have guys with different skills that kind of complement one another, be able to get it. He's the big physical guy that should be the post-up target, the jump ball specialist in the red zone. You can lean on him in one-on-one situations to win the 50-50 ball down the boundary. To me, this team is a 12 personnel team. This is Dalton Kincaid and Dawson Knox being on the field most of the time, with DJ Moore and Shakir on the field, and they're trying to create different matchups by putting multiple tight ends on the field to force the opposition to play either base or nickel to match up with the tight ends. And then off of the tight ends in the running game, that's where the passing game complements it, and that's where DJ Moore and Shakir begin to make their hay. So to me, this is a team that is going to be built to kind of play from ahead, which sounds kind of weird when you tell people that. But to me, this is a team that wants to play with the lead. They want to be able to run it. They want to be able to kind of control and dictate the terms. And I think the playoff game against the Jaguars was really kind of the preview for how it is, because I felt like they controlled the ball the entire game. They were squatting on the ball. They were taking the air out of it. And then in the fourth quarter, you're saying, okay, Josh, go win the game. Now, that's a lot of pressure on the quarterback to do it, but I think that's the best course of action until you know what you have on defense. Are they going to be able to generate and make it happen?
You know, just a follow-up then on Brady, and then I want to talk about the stadium too and get your thoughts before we wrap this thing up. But with Brady, I think the fan base, there are questions, you know, and I'm not asking you, you don't have the insight on this, I don't think anyway, but just from where you sit, right? How much of a handle did Sean McDermott have on that offense, right? In other words, with Brady, with the propensity for running the football, and obviously it's something you want to do when you have a guy like James Cook, and they did it so successfully, becomes the rushing champion. But, you know, the screen game and all of that, there's been a lot of criticism of Brady as well. Do you expect at all maybe to see maybe a different approach offensively now that McDermott is out of the equation? Or is this entirely Brady's offense, and is this kind of the personality of the offense that fans should expect moving forward?
That's a really good question, and that's one that we'll see kind of play out. I would say the first 5 games of the season, we get a better sense of what that is. I would say that obviously Sean McDermott controls some of that because he is going to be in the offensive coordinator's ear. Hey, I want you to play like this because it gives our defense the best chance to be successful, etc. Joe Brady, he may come in with these fancy ideas of, hey, I want to open up the offense. We want to look like the K-gun and like throw it all over the yard or whatever. But if that puts the defense in a bad spot, it's counterproductive. I think he is somewhere probably in the middle where some of the conservatism that fans would complain about, he probably does want to open it up, but he also has to understand a couple of things. One, does that work for my quarterback? Because as much as we talk about the quarterback, man, do I need him to play like a superhero all 17 games, or can we take some of the pressure off of him where we only need him to be Superman 6 times during the regular season so he has some gas left in the playoffs? So, hey, lean heavily on James Cook and the other guys to do it. And then secondly, it's the defense. How good is our defense? Is our defense a shut them down defense, or is our defense more of a compliment, like, hey, let's close it out, let's get it off the field, and those things? As they begin to kind of establish their identity on the defensive side of the ball, that will give him more options to dictate how he wants to play on offense. But I think how successful the defense is early will really determine if the offense is wide open or a little more conservative.
That's a good point.
Adam wanted to talk about the stadium a little bit. So you played in it. As I've said numerous times on this show, I was in there for the very first game, Bucky, 1973 as a kid. I was there for the very last game and about 400 or so in between. So what's hard right now, Buck, as the new stadium is pretty much done now across the street, is they didn't just rip the Band-Aid off with the old stadium and implode it. It's coming down piece by piece, and it feels like a little part of your soul every time I go there and I see a new section has been torn down. It's kind of killing me. I have a lot of memories there, but you played there. Just give us your thoughts on, the old rich stadium that you knew it as, and, moving into the new building now.
Yeah, it's so crazy to go from Rich Stadium to Ralph Wilson Stadium to all those other things. And the uniqueness of the thing, it's the only place that I've ever played in where both people come out the same tunnel. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I remember how contentious it used to be back in the day playing the Miami Dolphins, where we squished the fish, and how that was a big rivalry at the time when Don Shula was the coach and those guys there and coming up the tunnel and feeling all those things. And then for you guys being there, the comebacks and the epic wins and the moments and the advantage of the lake effect, snow, and all of those things, like that is a big part of the Bills lore. And like, I think about it because I have heard them talk about like the red helmets, because I was part of the red helmet thing, and like just the history and the nostalgia of all of that. How do you take that into the new stadium and create that kind of home field advantage that you certainly felt every time that you went into the old stadium? That'd be the part. Now, people will say this, well, the better the team, the more home field advantage you get. So we can talk about all the nostalgia and the names on the wall and the banners, but if your team is good, it's a home field advantage. So how good is this team? How can they create their own traditions within that own stadium? Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. But yeah, there's always going to be a part that is a little heartbroken when you think about, like, man, I can't believe that first stadium that I ever played in is no longer there.
How much is that like? I mean, we do a Sabres show as well, and we talked about how home ice advantage has really dissipated. It's almost like a home ice disadvantage at times. In the NFL, it's a little bit different due to the noise, right? There's going to be less wind in this new building. It's entirely enclosed with a big canopy. So weather's still going to be a factor in Buffalo, but just the structure of the new place sort of mitigates that a little bit. When a team, it's hard to come up with an answer, but as a former player, I'm just interested. When you transition into a new place like this, I mean, how much getting used to, when does home field advantage, beyond the noise, the obvious impact? I mean, is that even a thing at all, the transition into a new stadium? Is that something is it worth thinking about from an on-field performance perspective?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a significant thing that you have to adjust to. So I want you to think about the Bills Stadium. You think about some of those epic playoff wins. What was always the thing that was synonymous with that? It was always snow on the ground. It was always windy. I think about the comeback against the Houston Oilers and them being able to throw the ball all over yard, how advantageous it was to the Bills to be able to play and practice in those conditions. So it wasn't a big deal when you had to play in it. I think teams, particularly in the Northeast, where weather is a factor, you can't simulate that. If you're a team coming from Miami, you can't simulate what the conditions are. If you're a team coming from the West Coast, you can't simulate what those things are. Well, now you talk about a more climate control deal. The wind effect is minimized. It's not as big of a deal. But I think the biggest adjustment will be for returners and kickers trying to adapt to whatever the changes are. So when you're returning kicks, when the ball goes up, what's the backdrop? So when you play in Rich Stadium or the old stadium, well, look, it was natural. So you could look up, you see the sky, but you had to adjust to the wind and the way the wind would take it, cross stadium or whatever. Well, now in this new thing, you got to look up and can I find the ball in the lights or in all of the stuff? And so it takes a transition to be able to do it. And it's not just returners. Think about the passing game. Think about the deep passes when you look up. Can you catch it right away out the backdrop, or do you kind of get it lost in the surface that's over top or the lights that are behind it? So it takes some adjusting. I think they'll have a bunch of practices in it early to try and get your players adjusted to being in the thing. But those are some of the things that you try and work out in training camp during the week to try and get your team really, really comfortable.
An interesting perspective from a former player. Sal, you have anything else?
Nope, that'll do it for me, Buck.
All right, great stuff. Buck, really appreciate the time, man.
Man, always fun coming on with you guys.
Yeah. All right, both of you enjoy the rest of your what's left of the summer anyway. Sal would always tell me on that day, moving day, he would look at me year after year. I said, I know you remember this because we flanked each other covering that thing so many years. Well, summer's officially over. It's the end of summer for us. And it would be, you'd be excited.
At some point, I would say, what the F are we sitting here for? What are we doing here?
All right. Well,
we're only a couple weeks out. We're right back at it.
July 29th, right, is the first.
Yeah.
July 29th. And they're not here long, man. 8 days and they're back to Buffalo.
All right. Mm-hmm. Hey, Bucky Brooks, thanks so much. Really appreciate your time. We'll talk to you, no doubt, during the season.
Sure. We'll do it.
All right, Bucky Brooks, host of the Bucky Brooks Show here on the Bleav Network, analyst for NFL.com and former Buffalo Bill, and for Sal Maiorana, the Rochester Democrat and Chronicle. I'm Adam Benigni, WGRZ TV and Sports Talk Live Buffalo. This has been Bleav in Bills, presented by FanDuel.